will be handling the investigation on the DEC. Current attending members are Matcher, Verge, and Elena, and me. If you have an opening statement, you can begin, Secretary Thurley, but you don't have to.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will begin with an opening statement. The Department of Education and Commerce is charged with the protection of Redmont's economic system and to maintain stability. And that is my primary goal, and that's what I've always done as secretary. Nothing I've done which may have been in violation was done with capricious intent or with fraudulent intents. So I will begin by reciting the timeline of events which have occurred. I would like to post a infographic into an appropriate channel that the chairman may designate.
You can do it in voice chat.
Voice chat? All right, please give me a moment while I pull that up. While I pull that up, I'd like to thank the House Oversight Committee for their fervent commitment to this issue. Let's see. As members can see, I've posted an infographic into the voice chat. It's not really an infographic; it is a flow chart, which indicates the timeline of the situation. And I will begin at the very top. The root cause of the Onyx Exchange meltdown, which is what we're here to investigate today, I presume, began around December 2nd, when the Onyx Exchange opened its exchange credit program. Now, the exchange credit program within the Onyx Exchange is intended to allow better or easier transaction of stocks. So what a player and investor would do is they would pay the money in-game up front to the Onyx Exchange, and the Onyx Exchange would keep that money in a balance sheet. So that's the premise of the situation. So as you can see, as you move down the arrow, people buy into the Onyx Exchange credits. And the Onyx Exchange credit system balloons to about $450,000. Now, at this point, the Onyx Exchange begins to act as a banking institute. And all banking institutes are regulated by the Pug-Bandit Anti-Scams Act of March 2021, I believe. And within it, the Anti-Scam Act stipulates that all banking institutes must commit to a reserve ratio of 50%. So that means they must at least have 50% cash available. Now, because the Onyx Exchange was understood at the time by the DEC as simply an exchange, and that they don't actually hold people's money, right? It was exempt from any audits about that particular statute in the law. So that's where it says DEC does not notice that it has exceeded this amount. Now, the Onyx Exchange ratio at the time of the crisis was I believe 11 to 12%, which is significantly lower than the 50% outlined by the law. So that's where our issue begins, right? And so as this debt increases and as the Onyx Exchange spends its money, members of the public began wanting to take their money out. And this increase, this ballooned to a crisis when, let's see, where was it? A member who had invested $130,000 in the Onyx Exchange credit system, wanted all of their money back, and the Onyx Exchange only had about $50,000 to give out. And so this is when the Democracy Daily article from January 5th was sent out. And this was when the reporter asked me for my views on investing, and I gave my personal opinion, which was that speculative investments are not wise. Oh goodness, hold on. That speculative investments are not wise, and that people should take care when doing so. And of course, the article is published on the evening of January 5th, and there begins a kind of a mild panic sell-off within the public. It was at this time that the owner of the Onyx Exchange, Woody, reaches out to the DEC and asks for assistance. Originally, they asked for some sort of government statement that would calm the markets. And so here's where the idea for the original $200,000 Onyx credit purchase from the DEC was originated. So as a means of wanting to ensure that the Onyx Exchange didn't go into bankruptcy and didn't default, because the Onyx Exchange is of a tremendous importance to our economy. The DEC leadership, along with the president and the vice president, came up with a plan to basically give the Onyx Exchange financial assistance in exchange for certain concessions and certain terms, right? So these were conditioned. These were not a grant. These were not a gift. So it was at this time, the DEC basically proposes this idea to the president, and it takes about a day or two, I believe. It was within a day before we enacted any action. During this time, the Onyx Exchange was seeking donations, and it was seeking to liquidate some of its more illiquid assets to pay off the debt to the original debtor. And I will now go on to explain some of the detail of that initial bailout provisions, or those financial assistance provisions, which were that in exchange for this financial assistance from the government, that the Onyx Exchange would have to hand over every single balance sheet that it has, grant the DEC open access to every single Discord channel within its system, including staff channels and archive channels. That the Onyx Exchange will now have to begin abiding by the Anti-Scams Act, which means that they had to maintain that 50% ratio, which also means that they couldn't legally spend the amount that we had given them, because that they still wouldn't be at 50% even after the amount had been given. And this would come in two forms. There would be two ideas for this. One was that the government would be able to do this by first either seeing how much the financial assistance would be able to buy in terms of ownership stakes in the Onyx Exchange. That means that we aren't just giving them money for these things, but we're also buying a partial ownership of the Onyx Exchange, which means we get to, in the future, direct its operations somewhat. Or this would come in the form of a loan, a low interest loan, which means that they would have to pay this back sometime in the future. The exact timing was not decided. So these were the two ideas. But the primary reason for why we decided to send the money off to the Onyx before we had finalized any negotiations was because we recognized that we had to ensure consumer confidence in the Onyx. If we wanted the Onyx to continue to function and to have a high degree of public faith in its institutions, then we would have to ensure that the public could see that it was solvent, that it had money in its account. And so we came to a preliminary agreement, a very early agreement, which was on the condition that the Onyx gave omniscient access for the DEC to see into its channels and for its balance sheets, that the DEC would temporarily store about $200,000 in the company balance of the Onyx, so that whenever someone in game would run /CM info on the Onyx Exchange, they would see that they had about $250,000 in its bank, and they wouldn't be worried about the solvency of their Onyx Exchange credits. So that was the idea. That was the main idea. And of course, as a secretary, this is my first time doing secretary for commerce, I wrote up the proposal and I sent it up to the president and I sent it to the vice president, who gave approval for the implementation. So I did not receive any legal objections to this idea. I was not informed that we had to go to Congress. And so I initiated a prune, a prune of about $205,000, because it's not exactly, you can't get an exact prune. And we sent that off to the Onyx Exchange. And then immediately after that, in compliance with the Taxation Act, since this was technically spending, which exceeded $200,000, I reported that to Congress, which is where Congress found out. At the time when, as you can see, at that time when the money came out, that's the January 7th report, which is the one where I sent to which is the one I sent to Cabinet, to Congress, and to the President. The January 7th report went to Congress, and Congress Congress protested the issue, and we froze the money, which was already going to be frozen anyways. The Onyx was not allowed to utilize any of that money. And so a few days pass with regards to the Onyx situation. For about 7 days, we thought we were stabilizing. We were continuing the negotiation with Woody about acquisitions or long-term loans. And it was at this time that a particularly interesting situation occurred. There was a controversy regarding an Onyx-backed credit obligation contract system, which had been circulating and which had been sold to the Hamilton City Banking Corporation. Now, and at the same time, this was about January 15th, I believe, the Daily Chip wrote an article about leaked excerpts of the January 7th report, which has now hence been declassified, so everyone can read that. And what happened was these were contracts that bet on the value of the Onyx Exchange, and the contracts made a bet that the Onyx would go down in value. And that's where the current situation is with these two items. Now, these are kind of separate issues, but they're also not that separate. I'll get into that later. Does any member of Congress have any questions at this time about anything I've said? Have I been clear, misleading, perhaps too boring? Mm-hmm. Perhaps I can continue. Or does Congress have any questions?
Sorry, my mic was acting up. Okay.
Xerxes. Yeah.
I think we were just waiting for you to finish your opening statements, and then we will go over some of the points again.
Right. Understandably, I guess I'll continue on with the Onyx-backed credit obligation situation. At the time, we recognized that the Onyx-backed credit obligations may have been fraudulent or of a criminal nature, due to the fact that we believed at the time that the member who created it had access to classified information, which would, of course, be a violation of the Corporate Crimes Act under the Insider Trading Clause. After further investigation, after we sought more information, we forwarded all available information to the Attorney General's office, who I believe will be initiating a prosecution. That is now in the Attorney General's office. I don't know too much about what's going on there. But I would like to, I guess, provide a little bit of evidence to Congress about what happened. Essentially, the person who sold these Onyx-backed credit obligations was the owner or operator of 3 businesses. And these 3 businesses were Netflix, it was Netflix, Nico Palace, and Citigroup. And they total valued about $700,000 on the Onyx Exchange. And essentially, on the 14th of January, this person went to the Onyx Exchange, and I could see this because of the prior arrangement we had with Woody to be able to see everything that was happening in the Onyx. We could see that this person came in and asked to deregister all 3 companies, right? So this was on January 14th. And of course, this was, a couple of hours after the Onyx-backed credit obligations had been sold to the Hamilton City Bank. And we could see this person come in, and they deregistered 3 companies. And then immediately after that, they asked the owner of the Onyx to re-register these companies, so it would do a little bit of a dip, like a negative heartbeat, so that he could fulfill the obligation. He could fulfill the terms of the contract and be able to legally ask for monies owed under those contracts. And so the DEC initiated an investigation into the situation. The DEC issued a press release stating that these were potential scams, and we asked for all public members to come forward with any information that were available, and there was a lot of it. We thanked the members of the public who came forward, and we initiated that investigation. That, of course, is handed off to the AGO. Now, about a day or 2 days, I don't exactly remember, after we issued the press release calling the Onyx-backed credit obligations potential scams, a member of Congress approached me in a voice call, in a private voice call. It was not recorded, but the information was transcribed, and it was immediately sent off to the DEC. And now I'd like to read to the members of Congress some of this transcript, which I believe would be of interest. The information contained, the member came to me and asked why it was that the DEC felt that it was legal for us to declare these contracts as illegal, and that the person came forward and strongly protested about this, which is fine. This is perfectly legal. And then the representative came forward and asked, didn't you guys misappropriate $250K? Unlawful. It is unlawful to prune $900K. You believe that it was unlawful to issue $200K to Onyx? Do you know that I've been holding back on a congressional investigation, and a lot of people want to open an investigation? Do you know who else feels appropriate to conduct an investigation? The Attorney General's office. I asked, you said the Attorney General's office. The representative responded, I didn't say the Attorney General's office. And the representative continued for about 20 minutes on all sorts of attempts to pressure the DEC into ending our investigation into the Onyx-backed credit obligation scheme. So that's where we're at now. The current situation regarding the Onyx exchange. I believe that concludes my opening statements. I could answer general questions about prunings and other sorts of other related issues.
Okay, thank you for your opening statement. Does any representative want to go first with their questions? I'll assume that's a no. Okay, then I will go over my questions. I want to go back to the pruning. When did you conduct the pruning for the month of January, and how much did you prune?
The pruning for the month of January was conducted twice. There were 2 separate pruning occasions. I'd like to pull up the information specific to that, because we do log this in the DEC. Let me pull that up for you. Pruning. Let me see. Hello, what's up? Oh, okay.
Keep it up, Mr. Econ Man.
Yeah, okay. Let's see. Pruning. So there are several types of pruning that we do. There's the perm band player prune, which is where we basically prune anyone who's been permanent.
I just need to know how much you prune. Well,
I would like to explain for the benefit of the audience to understand what pruning actually is. So if you give me the time. There's also the inactive companies prune, which is any company that has been inactive for 4 months will have the entirety of their balance, and any inactive player prune. And so for the month of January, what we did was primarily inactive player prunes. For the month of January, we pruned approximately 20 individuals. We pruned approximately 15 individuals on January 4th, with a value of about $700,000 was the value of the prune there. The record of this is also available on the Treasury tab under repossessions. And then January 5th, which is where the Onyx Exchange crisis occurred, I suppose. We also pruned an additional dozen members to generate the $200,000 necessary for the financial assistance program.
Okay, thank you. Then my next question. You pruned the money into the DEC account as opposed to the DC government account. Why?
Firstly, it is true in the technical sense that I pruned it first in the DEC account. However, I do not have permission to find directly into the DC government account. So what we've been doing, and what I believe every secretary before me has done, is that they do /find DEC first, and we measure how much we pruned, and then we send that money from the DEC account to the government balance, which is why you don't see the DEC balance with 800,000 in the balance for any time longer than 5 minutes.
Okay, then why did you who put the money from the DEC account to the DC government account?
No money ever transferred from the DC government account to the DEC.
No, who put the money from pruning from the DEC account to the main government account?
I did.
Who did that?
I did. So what I did was I would run the /grant command. I would simply just grant the money to the DC government account.
Okay, I see. Okay, then my next question. However, you did not transfer the full approximately 900K you pruned to the DC government account. You kept 250K in the DC account. Why?
All right, so I guess we have to dig back a little further. In December, the DEC, i.e. me, asked President Consumer for $250,000 in our budget. And by January 5th, I hadn't heard any information about that, and Consumer hadn't transferred any money into the DEC balance yet. And so I was under the impression that he had simply been inactive or hadn't done so at the time. And the DEC balance at the time was running very low, and we were about to essentially run out for grants and other normal operations. And so, considering that I was already going to engage in a massive $900,000 prune for the general government fund, which at the time I believe was hovering at around $200,000, which is not very good. What I did was I simply topped up the DEC balance and then sent the rest of it off to the DC government. So that was a procedural mistake, I believe.
So is it regular that you give yourself pruning, that you appropriate your own balance in pruning? Has this ever happened before that you needed pruning to top up your own balance?
Has it ever happened? I don't recall ever having to do it before. Usually by the start of the month, the DEC balance is already at the amount that we need. So like at the start of November, at the start of December, November was I think $200,000. At the start of December, it was $150,000, and at the start of January, it was supposed to be $250,000. But the budget act hadn't been the budget for January hadn't been passed yet, and I did not know that it hadn't been passed yet.
Okay, but normally right. You don't appropriate the budget, do you? The president appropriates the budget for you.
Well, normally I fund the government through prunes, because this isn't the first time we've done prunes.
No, but like when budget appropriating, when the law passes, the president appropriates the money for you.
I was not aware of what the law does or does not do at that time.
Oh, but isn't it also protocol for the president to announce first in cabinet announcements when the budget has passed?
It is not protocol. I mean, I didn't.
You didn't know it was protocol.
Well, cabinet did not have that habit of pinging me when my budget's been topped up. Well, the president would ask me in cabinet.
Okay.
With the permission of the chairman, may I jump in and offer testimony?
If it's quick, yes.
Yeah. So usually it's not necessary to inform cabinet of new appropriations because money is generally appropriated before we run out, and secretaries can simply resume normal operations from the new budget because the budget is usually passed in a timely manner. For reasons that I don't think were really clarified, the House had failed to put up the, I believe it was the January budget up to vote, which is why it took an incredibly long time for the DEC to receive any funding, and it was kind of unprecedented because secretaries, by the time that 30 had appropriated money to the DEC, everyone was normally the budget would have been passed by then. So I think that can be the assumption.
But, well, I was in the business committee at the time. That's not exactly what happened, but okay. Thank you for your testimony. But so you thought that the DEC was the only department which has not received its appropriations yet.
I cannot speak for what other secretaries believe. I know that I cannot. I cannot speak for what other secretaries think.
I'm not asking you to.
Secretaries for their department. I'm
not asking you to speak
for myself.
On behalf of them.
Right. I'm going to speak for myself and say that the DEC was not aware that we had not been appropriated the amount.
But what did you think? Did you think that all departments' accounts were appropriated their funds except for the DEC, and that you needed to appropriate it yourself?
Of course, again, I cannot speak for other departments. I am not.
No, I'm asking you to speak for yourself.
Right. Exactly.
Did you think that the DEC was the only department at the time that you gave yourself 250K? Did you think that the DEC was the only department which has not received its appropriations?
I disagree with the premise of the question of only. I believe that the DEC had not been given its appropriation.
But did you think that the other departments have gotten their appropriations?
Well, I was under the impression that the Congress had already passed
That's not my question. That's not my question.
Which I guess would mean that, yes, I did believe other departments had already been appropriated their budgets.
So you think that the president appropriated everyone's budget except for yours?
I believe that the president may have forgotten to appropriate the DEC budget, or for some reason hadn't gotten to it yet, which I believe is normal. Everyone has IRL in real life stuff to do. Sometimes we forget. So but what I understood was that by the start of January 5th, the DEC budget was down to $30,000, and that was not a sustainable amount because we had payments to give via grants. We had to ensure that the consumer price index was being done and that employees were paid, and so we didn't have enough money. So it was necessary to proceed with the action that was taken.
Mm-hmm. And you also wanted to do the 200K bailout.
That is a separate issue.
But that was relevant to your decision to give yourself the 250K.
The 250K had already been given. So there were two prunes, remember. There was the $700,000 prune and there's the $200,000 prune. The $700,000 prune was where I decided that, the DEC budget had to be topped up because it was already a week into January and the DEC was going to run out of money if we didn't do that. And I was under the impression that we had already been legally appropriated that amount, that Congress had already passed a budget of $250,000. So
you, as the DEC secretary, was not aware of the appropriations process?
No, I was not aware that Congress had not passed our January budget by January.
Well, okay. But then, let me go to questions. Okay.
Mr. Representative, I, as the secretary, am concerned about the efficient runnings of my government. I am not concerned with what happens in Congress. Usually that is notified to me via cabinet, and I report to cabinet.
Well, you should be. You should concern yourself with appropriations, as that is part of the job of the treasurer. Okay, but then let's talk about the bailout. Okay, when did you authorize the bailout?
The bailout was authorized January 7th, I believe.
By whom?
The president gave preliminary approval for the remedy action.
What does preliminary approval mean?
Which means we proposed the idea to the president. The president agreed.
But what do you mean with preliminary? How is it preliminary?
We proposed the idea to the president, and the president agreed to it.
Sorry, what?
The idea was proposed to the president and to the vice president and to cabinet, and there was no objection. And the president approved it.
Yeah, but why is it preliminary? Isn't it preliminary because it was before the budget has passed? Is that why it was preliminary?
Again, I was not aware that the budget had not been passed by January 7th. At this time, I had been under the impression that the budget had been passed for a week. And so I was not operating with the assumption that we didn't have the money.
Okay. And also in the bailout, you say like in the budget channel in the bailout, it's funds used 200K government via DEC. Why is it not just DEC? Why is it government via DEC?
Because the money had technically had been freshly pruned, so the money wasn't taken out of the DEC government balance, nor was it taken out of the DEC government balance. It was
by January 7th, when you did the bailout, you knew that the money was not appropriated to DEC yet.
No, I was aware that I was under the impression that the government had appropriated $250,000 for the DEC budget, and I did not correlate the two issues. Okay,
but then why is it government via DEC instead of DEC budget?
Sorry, would you be able to repeat that?
Why is it government via DEC instead of the regular DEC account?
Because this was a issue concerning a government-wide spending, not just the DEC spending.
But you just said it was because you freshly pruned it. That's why.
Well, freshly pruned money is not DEC money.
Oh, so now you agree that's not DEC money?
Well, freshly pruned money is not DEC money.
So when does it come?
Freshly pruned money usually goes directly into the DC government balance. So instead of pruning the 200K, putting it into the DEC balance, then transferring from the DEC balance to the government balance, and then going from government balance out to do the financial assistance, I simply went from prune to DEC and then out to the institution that was in need.
Okay, but those 200K would be subtracted from your 250K budget.
I'm sorry?
So you believe that a 200K would be subtracted from your 250K budget for the DEC?
No, I did not.
You thought you had the authority to use that 200K from the government, freshly pruned, and spend it on the bailout money?
Because the DEC had pruned it, yes.
Therefore, you have control of the pruning money because the DEC pruned it.
Well, the DEC has discretion over how much to prune.
But it does not have discretion over the pruning money. The pruning money belongs to the government,
right?
The DEC government, and the DEC does not have authority over the pruned money. They're just the middleman.
Well, it's good that you're telling me this now.
So you used the 200K out of our DC government pruned money.
No, you were not. It was not out of the DC government money. The DC government did not have that.
Once it's pruned, it's DC government's money.
Once it is pruned, yes, it is usually directly handed over to the DC government.
So
the difference between what can be potentially pruned and what is pruned. Currently, there is about $1.5 million, which is potentially pruned. However, we won't say that is government money.
But still, you used your permissions to appropriate yourself 200K, and then
hold on.
that money.
I would like to correct the record. I did not appropriate it to myself. The amount was appropriated to the DEC balance.
No, but you used pruning money to you use pruning money to do a bailout using your DEC account, even though that you didn't even think it would go off your DEC appropriations. You thought you had authority to use DC government money for a bailout.
I didn't say I thought I had authority. I had sought authority from the president.
So you thought the president had authority to use DC government funds?
Yes, I was under the impression that the president had discretion over such spending.
If the president would like to respond, whether or not he gave that permission.
Yeah, I approved. I wanted to maintain investor confidence in the only stock exchange of the server, and that's why I approved a usage of DEC funds to provide a bailout to Onyx.
So you thought, Mr. President, that the pruning profits were DEC funds?
No, I believe that pruning profits go directly to the DC government until they're approved for appropriations.
Oh, so you thought the 200K would go out of the DEC government account, out of the appropriations?
Out of correctly appropriated money, yes.
So you thought that the DEC would only have 50K left for the rest of the month?
Could you clarify the timeline?
On January 7th, a bailout was put in #budget. A bailout of 200K. By that time, 30 appropriated himself 250K. And my question is, do you believe that the 200K bailout would come out of the DEC account? Out of their appropriations?
I wasn't under the assumption that the bailout would be enacted immediately with the limited funds that the DEC had at the time. I think we're both under the assumption that that we could use the money that would be newly appropriated by Congress.
Okay, but then still, we only appropriated 250K, but then the bailout would be 200K, so there would only be 50K left for the rest of the month.
Well, that was a course of action that the DEC secretary had reviewed and accepted.
But that is not what the DEC secretary thought. He thought he could use the DC government pruned money for the bailout. Correct, Sordy?
Could you repeat that question?
You thought that the 200K bailout would go out of the newly pruned money instead of the appropriated funds for the DEC. Yes?
If I'm correct, I thought Authority provided the bailout under the assumption that $250,000 had already been appropriated to the executive, which was a perfectly reasonable assumption because the budget had normally been passed by then.
But
I concur with the president's statements.
Okay, so there has been a miscommunication between 30 and the president.
No, wait. 30, could you clarify what you just said? You said something about the president's statement.
I believe the president had the authority to appropriate from the government balance, and I sought presidential approval for that action. If we had taken the money directly out of the DEC budget, then I would not have needed to consult the president on DEC spending.
Okay, and you do not think you gave authority to do that, consumer?
Yeah, I do believe that a miscommunication occurred.
All right, thank you. All right, I will hand off the questions to the next representative. Elena, would you like to go? Oh, I think there's a problem with the mic.
I guess we'll wait. Elena, how's it going? Well, I guess we'll wait it out. Yeah.
Or maybe Matcher or Mahad, should we start with you first?
Sure, that would be fine.
Okay.
Mr. Secretary, how involved is the DEC in the Onyx exchange operations as of now?
Just to repeat, you asked how involved the DEC is with the operations of the Onyx exchange?
Yes, you mentioned that you have access to the channels in the exchange. So how involved is the DEC being at this time?
The access that we were granted was conditioned upon the DEC's basically assistance to the Onyx exchange, which was withdrawn approximately on January 21st. So we no longer have access to most of the channels in the Onyx exchange. We still have access to like records of we still have access to a balance sheet and to their archives, but we are not permitted to speak or to interfere or to well, for me personally, just as a principal, I'm not permitted to conduct trades.
And Mr. Secretary, would the DEC consider future bailout discussions for the exchange if it's believed to be necessary?
Yes.
Okay. And would the DEC pursue a similar path of administering the bailout as last time, or would there be perhaps a discussion with members of Congress or a discussion with the wider DEC economist group?
New budget was okay. The DEC will proceed along a similar line, but obviously we will of course defer to Congress for any spending which has not been appropriated.
Okay, thank you. And so considering that communication, as you said, is much more limited as it was previously with Onex, what is your professional opinion on the current stability of the exchange? And do you think it's moving towards a path where a bailout may be necessary in the future?
I'm of the opinion that the exchange has stabilized significantly since January 5th. One of the reasons why the negotiations failed, quote unquote, was not because we were not able to come to an agreement, but that the DEC recognized that the Onyx no longer needed the money, and the Onyx wanted certain access and privileges which the government as a whole was not ready to give them at the time. And so the discussion had gone from being a rescue the institution kind of discussion to more of a can we trade for more privileges, which was not like something we were willing to discuss. And so we pulled out of discussions.
Is the DEC aware? Sorry.
In short, the Onyx exchange, in my professional opinion, is doing better than it was on January 5th.
Okay, thank you. Is the DEC aware that in the most recent budget there is a provision that they cannot use appropriated funds for a bailout or any other non-intended or regular purposes without congressional approval?
I am aware of that provision. I will say that a engagement with the Onyx exchange is not irregular. During the tenure of my predecessor, Huge Bob, he engaged in about $130,000 worth of stock trade using DEC money, which generated substantial profits for the government by the start of my term, which was in October. And so engagement with the Onyx exchange has been ongoing ever since its inception back in July. So it would be hard to differentiate what is regular or irregular in terms of DEC actions with the Onyx. And so the tool that we used to send money to the Onyx was that we were buying exchange credits. That was the tool. It would be the same as if Huge Bob, my predecessor, had bought stocks of companies. We were trading liquid cash for essentially an asset on the exchange, with the promise that that asset would be returned back.
Okay. But because in the most recent budget, funds cannot be used towards future bailouts,
it
that
will not be a bailout. Any, of course, as I said previously, any bailouts or financial assistance program which exceeds the max limit for grants and other under normal constraints would have to go through Congress, as I said before. But of course, obviously, I don't see the purchase of stocks or assets as a sort of bailout. Like if I went into Walmart and I brought iron for the government, I would not consider that a bailout for Walmart. So in the same vein as for the Onyx, if I had purchased stocks in the Onyx exchange, I would not consider that a bailout for the Onyx exchange.
Okay. But whenever I asked you previously if the DEC would consider a future bailout, you said very clearly that you would. So I'm just wondering what manner of bailout that would be, considering that you didn't say if it would have congressional approval or not.
I beg to differ. I did say that it would require congressional approval.
Well, I asked you like the manner of which the bailout would be brought through, and you said it would be very similar to the previous one without the the lack of communication that occurred.
Right, with the exception that, of course, we will seek congressional approval.
Okay.
Well, I guess I'll go into more detail for that answer. So what we'll basically do, the formula will hopefully be the same. I can't speak for the next secretary who will take my position, but I assume they will follow the precedent we did, which is that we will utilize a prune first, not so that it does not impact the government budget, and then we will formulate a plan which will be proposed to the president for approval, and to cabinet, which would then be which would then approve the measure, and then we will, if necessary, if it exceeds the DEC budget, or if there are certain constraints like the February budget, then it will follow the necessary legal guidelines for that to go forward.
So you specified that exceeds the DEC budget, correct?
Exceeds or as required by law.
Okay, or as required by law. So because the current writing is even if you do use DEC funds, that would still need congressional approval. Do you agree with that?
As required by law. So
okay.
Suppose that the Onyx Exchange comes to the DEC and asks for a property grant, which I do not believe they've done so before. The max amount we can currently give them is $15,000. Well, $10,000 for property grant according to DEC policy. So obviously, if they came and asked for that, right, the DEC has full discretion as to whether or not to hand that out, as it always does for any and all business grants. So for that particular situation, I will not be consulting Congress on grants. However, if it's a special request or a special assets request which exceeds the DEC's budget, or if we believe that requires compliance with certain laws and provisions, then we will seek congressional authority.
Okay, those are all the questions I have at this time. I'll give the speaking back to our chairman, Milkcrack.
All right, thank you. I think we will move on to Elena.
Can you guys hear me this time?
Yes.
Okay, I don't know what happened, so I switched devices. Ignore background noise because my brother and my cousin are over here and they're playing Madden, so they're being loud. So my first question is, do you believe that your communication with your staff has been a recent issue in your department?
No, it has not been a recent issue of my department.
So, do you believe that you've been transparent with the public about what's been happening within the department?
I am not obligated to be transparent with the public about what happens within the department, as the DEC Code of Conduct forbids me from disclosing information pertaining to employees. So I can only speak on issues which I am aware of or that I have been authorized to communicate to the public.
How would you describe your recent attitude within your department?
Would you be able to repeat that?
How would you describe your recent attitude within the department?
My absence within the department, or my absence within the department?
Your attitude.
Attitude within the department?
Yes.
I am of the attitude that the DEC is a government entity which ensures the stability of Renmon's economy.
Do you believe that you've been a leader within the department?
I am the leader of the department.
Well, I'm asking if you believe that you've actually been acting as a leader.
Yes, I believe I've been acting as a leader.
How so?
The Department of Education and Commerce is headed by the secretary, and the secretary lays out the administrative and external policies of the department. If what your question insinuates is that I've delegated too much authority to my deputies, or the team leaders, then I will strongly disagree with the notion of that question.
Do you feel that you've recently communicated with your employees about tasks that need to be completed?
I have delegated authority about day-to-day operational tasks to the team leaders, which is why I speak directly and most frequently to team leaders. The Department of Education and Commerce is, I believe, one of the largest departments. We have four solid teams with 2 teams which are in the periphery. So we have the DC bids team, we have the commerce team, we have the compliance team, we have the education team, we have the business team. Each of these teams employs about 3 to 6 employees each with a team leader, and I expect that day-to-day tasks are handled by the team leaders. I, in my personal capacity, do not have the resources to handle the baseline of the hierarchical pyramid. So, in the DC, we have I would say, an efficient system of communication. So anything which the secretary needs to complete is handed directly from the team leaders to the secretary. So any commands I need to run in game, any discussions I need to make with cabinet, etc., all of that is handled, is communicated to me by the team leaders. All team members also have access to what I call the secretary outbox in the Discord. And so if there are issues which they require me to do immediately, they are supposed to communicate that directly.
Do you feel that you've been an efficient leader and person of contact for employees who may have questions about their tasks and responsibilities?
I am not the primary person for discussion about their particular team's primary contact. So what I do as secretary is that I execute the commands which have been passed on from the business team, which is primarily grants commands and company permission commands. That's because I do not have time to be. Oh my god. That is because there are dozens of things which are happening in the DEC at the same time. I'd like to remind the committee that the DEC is governed by up to 25 laws, which dictates what we are supposed to do. It goes from compliance with regards to financial transparency and audits to the new Minimum Commissions Act, which we still have to allocate more employees to conduct those tasks. to the Consumer Price Index, which contains hundreds of data points at every month, and business applications and grants. And there are a lot of things which needs to be done. And of course, I am only a single person. I don't have that capacity to do all of them, which is why we have a very efficient department, which is separated and which is not separated, which has a delegated team leader who is supposed to be in charge of those situations. I, as the secretary, deal with cabinet, and to a certain extent deal with Congress, and deal with issues of a more macro perspective on the situation.
So to put it simply, you don't believe that within your role of secretary, you should be someone that your employees feel like they should be able to contact if they have questions. They should immediately reach out to team leaders, and they can't feel comfortable with reaching out to you. They must.
Representative, I must respectfully decline your notion that I do not invite members to speak to me directly. Multiple times during my tenure as secretary, I have ended my updates with, if you have any questions, just ping me for any questions, or you can send me a DM, or you can feel free to ping me. These are all how I sign off on major announcements, and that is still my policy today. However, say, for example, someone from the auctions, in the auctions channel, right, has a question about a particular policy, or there's difficulty there. I would expect that employee to first contact the manager or the team leader for the DC Bids channel before contacting me, because that is how it's supposed to go. And obviously, if they contacted me directly, I would respond in a timely manner, or if the team leader is unable to handle the situation. But I have a lot of tasks under my belt, and that is why I cannot answer everything or be micromanaging everything. I hope that answers your question, Representative.
Well, my initial question was just if you felt that you were a person that your employees felt like they could contact, and in a very roundabout way, I feel that you basically said that you aren't there to answer questions necessarily, which makes me feel as though what you're saying is that you are not someone that they should probably feel.
Representative Elena, I suggest you get your speakers checked, because that's not what I said. Representative, I said that employees may contact me anytime they want, and that the proper course, and it is proper that employees contact their immediate team leaders, because I often do not understand what the team leaders have assigned them to do, right? So if the education team leader has assigned a member of the team to go and review the exams for the recycler job, right, it would be irrational for that employee to ask me about the status of the recycler job, or how to do the recycler job, or what to do about it. I would simply have to bounce that question back to their team leader, because the team leader is the one who assigned them to the job. This is how delegation of authority works.
Minecraft.
So are you saying that within these different teams, you don't necessarily know what people are being tasked with? You're just relying on team leaders to initiate without you overseeing necessarily what these team leaders are doing? You're passing tasks on to them?
Yes. Just as I would not expect the president to know what an employee in the DEC is doing. This is the delegated authority which I have given to the team leaders. This is the delegated authority I've given to the deputy. It is the delegated authority I've given to the business team leader. You see, that is why the business team leader is the one who answers the applications on billboards and companies, because that is their job. Because it is the job of the team leader to paste the information in and to conduct the vote within the review committees. My job is to oversee the team leaders and to ensure that new employees are trained and that new employees are assigned to their proper teams, and that Congress is, I guess, satisfied as difficult as they are to satisfy, that cabinet is informed and that the president is informed.
Minecraft.
My basic question was just, do you understand what is going on within these different teams?
Yes. Yes, I am aware of
active role in assigning tasks within the, like giving the team leaders what needs to be done, and these team leaders are passing along this information to the people within the team.
Yes, that is how the delegation of authority works.
So you are overseeing these teams in some way, shape, or form.
I am the head of the department. I oversee every single team.
So if you are overseeing teams, then you should know what your employees are doing.
The team leaders are the managers within those teams.
Oh yeah. Go. Wow.
Because I feel if you have people that are employed within your department, you should know if they are having tasks. And if they aren't having tasks and they aren't completing tasks, you know, are you able to manage and stay on top of what they're doing to know if these people should still be employed within your department?
We could go to overtime.
Representative, do you have a specific question that you'd like me to answer? Is
I just asked it.
The question that the DEC contains too many employees which haven't been fired?
If you are not involved in the process of each of your employees, then how do you know that any of your employees are actually completing tasks?
The team leaders report to me whether or not their tasks have been completed.
So you have no communication with anyone that is below a team leader?
The vast majority of my communications are with the team leaders, as it is easier this way, because the team leaders are the ones with access to their individual teams, and they are the ones who are supposed to develop the lower team leader team member relationship, and they're supposed to be the team leader. I have a half dozen teams to look over. There are last I checked 50 employees in the DEC. And I would expect, of course I would expect members of my department to be doing the best they can, but obviously if someone has real life issues, right, I can't compel them to work, or I can't micromanage them.
So would you say that the team leaders are handling perhaps, you know, most of the tasks within the department?
The team leader is supposed to manage their teams, and the teams make up the department. So I do not understand what you mean by the team leaders doing most of the work. And we all do our fair share. We all work hard, and I believe that I have selected a very excellent team.
So do you believe that you're handling a majority of department runnings recently?
Could you repeat that one more time?
Do you believe that you are handling a majority of the department runnings recently?
I handled the entire department, 100% of the department.
Well, you've just told me that your team leaders are responsible for running most of the tasks and you oversee what they do. So I guess what my question is how much... Excuse me, thank you. Let me finish my question.
Go.
Of the work within the department, how much do you feel that you are doing in comparison to what your team leaders are doing?
In terms of direct percentage of what we do, is that what you're asking? In terms of the workload, like the hours spent with the DEC, is that how do you define what we do? Because obviously those at the very, I don't want to say bottom, because I do not necessarily believe that a team member, just because they're not a team leader, are not valued, but that obviously those who are in the teams and those who aren't myself or the deputy do more than myself or the deputy in terms of hours contributed, because I only have 24 hours a day, right? And I can't simply be online all the time. And so I utilize my time efficiently, and I expect the team leader to utilize their time efficiently.
Do you recognize that the team leaders do a lot, or do you feel that you are above them simply because you are a secretary, you do most of the work?
Representative, you're misleading the public by the way you're asking these questions, as if you're trying to paint a picture of a divide between the DEC deputy and myself, between the team leaders.
I haven't even mentioned the deputy at
There's no
all.
such divide. I trust my team to do what needs to be done. I trust them, which is why they understand that they have the authority to proceed with projects which pertain to their team. Just as I would expect the president to trust me to run my department.
I don't think the president would trust you to fuck a board.
Representative, I must defend the integrity of my department. My department has worked very hard and has suffered tremendous abuses from all these allegations from the public. And I have borne the brunt of it, and I would gladly take the brunt of it in order that my department does not suffer such abuses. The members of my department, I believe, are the hardest working on the server, and they contribute the most. And the vast majority of the work, I will say, is not in game. The vast majority of the work is online. My deputy, whose work is primarily in internal management and handling the DC bids, and they handle all of the applications which come through. Each of these tasks I cannot do alone, and I am dependent on my team. The Consumer Price Index has been published, Cupcake. It is available on the forums. I apologize if I've come across as very strong or I guess somewhat emotional, but it is the truth.
So going back to my previous question about being a leader, I understand that as secretary, you're the leader of the department, but I'm saying on an aspect of in what way characteristically are you a leader and how you lead your department, not just as the secretary, but as someone who is a motivator, someone who, is someone that does their work, helps out. And that way, how are you a leader? Not in the sense that I'm the secretary, I am the leader, I run it. In the sense of what do you actually do to be a leader within the department?
That question is tremendously broad. I would have to say that I contribute my fair share to the department. I believe I contribute probably more than most of the I think someone corrected me earlier, 36 employees which are currently employed.
I'm not asking how you are a secretary once again. I'm just asking within your department, how are you someone that people can rely on and look up to? Not within I'm a secretary, the end.
You see the geese?
What are you able to do to show that you are someone who does their job, comes in, works with the people and for the people?
Representative, my job is to the economy and to the department. My job is not necessarily to make people smile or to satisfy them via some policy that benefits them particularly. My job is to ensure the stability of the government. And
I understand that. I am not asking in what way you are a secretary leader. I'm asking how you are able to efficiently be a person who does your completed tasks and motivates your employees.
Elena, I don't think that's the proper question. I think the proper question should be, how efficient has the department been? And I will say that compared to my predecessor, Huge Bob, we have been very, very efficient, much more efficient than it has been before. And I say by that metric, by the metric of efficiency, I have been a very good leader.
Okay, so I'm asking you, how do you think that you've been able to be more efficient?
I think I have demonstrated it. I have made the proper choices. I have hired the proper people. I have put the proper members into team leader positions. I have trusted and I have delegated the appropriate amount. That is why we are efficient. That's why we are tremendously better than the previous my previous predecessor, Huge Bob, where almost nothing got done. That's why I think I am the better leader.
I wasn't he was your leader, but I'm gonna end it there. Thanks.
All right. I have just a few more questions for 30. Then the meeting will be over, and we'll have a Q&A with if people from the public want to ask any questions. But my question for you, Secretary of 30, is: if you do not engage with employees, if you do not manage the employees personally, if you delegate all of that to the deputy secretary, then what do you do as a secretary?
Mr. Representative, my job as secretary is to be the administrator and primary operator of the department. I approve any final decisions which come up from the departments. And I communicate to the team leaders what the will of cabinet is and what I believe is best for the economy. So I'm constantly I would like to dispel the notion that I don't try to micromanage. There were some times earlier on in November where people complained that I micromanaged too much or that I wasn't talking enough with the team leaders. And so it's been a learning curve. And so I would like to point out that I served in my capacity as secretary, also as the commerce leader for about 3 months, because I believe that I was the only one who was capable of running the consumer price index until I had trained our current consumer price our current commerce team leader to be able to take over the job. So I do not appreciate the notion that I have not been in contact with my department. I'd say it is quite the opposite. And projects which I constantly and I routinely encourage employees to go on and provide their own initiative on projects, just as I did under the tenureship of Huge Bob.
All right.
When I was head of the economics department in the DEC, which was under Huge Bob, I wrote articles.
I understand. Thank you for your answer. I understand. Okay. Then my other question is, currently the DEC balance as of right now is it's loading. DEC, it's 278K. Can you please explain me how this is possible with your appropriations of 250K, which have gone into effect an hour ago?
I have been pruning money during this
You've been pruning money during this session.
Yes.
While you were talking,
the president asked me to conduct prunes, and I have a limited
during the session. He asked you to
yes,
conduct
and
pruning.
It'll be easy. It'll be very easy to transfer that money back into the DC government balance because I'll be able to see which amount exceeds our appropriated budget. So
okay.
I hope we're current. I am multitasking at this time.
Okay, but the budget got approved like an hour ago, right? So an hour ago it was 250K.
Yes.
Do you have an estimate how much you spent on grants and CPI and etc. the month of January?
For the month of January?
Mm-hmm.
I'll have to pull up the logs on that. Give me a moment. Well, okay. Off the top of my head, I have not paid out the employee payments for CPI yet. I intend to do that very soon. Once we publish the latest figures, which would be for January. In terms of grants, I'll have to check the logs for that. Please give me a moment. Grants, let's see. So January 1st, January 24th, granted 9,000, fined 5,000. I think there was January 18th, we granted 41,000. January 18th again, we'd grant another 5,000. 75,000 on January 12th for academic grants, 5,000 for business grants on the 12th. Again, 3,000 for academic grants. And 20. Oh, okay. So we did do CPI payments in January, but that was for the month of December. So there's $22,000 for employee pay for about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 employees. Another $22,000 grant on the 3rd of January. And about
how much in total?
Sorry.
So just an estimate of how much in total.
How much in total? That would be
just for the month.
22, 3, 5. So that's 2, 2, 44, 47, 52, 59, 64, 73, 73 plus 41. So that's be about $110,000.
Okay, so you spent $110,000 on the January budget, correct?
Yes.
So as of this morning, before appropriations, the budget was $210K. Can you please explain to us how the budget was $210K this morning before appropriations?
The DEC receives income occasionally from supply depots or from various other sources, and fines for building. No, sorry, not building, for billboards. Fines from those who have created companies, so it charges $500 per company that's created.
That money shouldn't be going to the DEC balance. That money should be going to the DEC government.
Well, if the money from the supply depot comes automatically into the DEC balance, I don't.
Well,
really
the supply depot, I understand,
right.
But
well, payment for billboards are done via the /find DEC command. I do not have access to direct fines.
All right. Then my final question, I'll post a screenshot in budget. I already asked you about this in Congress Cabinet. However, you refused to answer, so I would like you to answer now.
I would like to point out I did not refuse to answer. Where is the question?
The question is, what does this mean?
What is this mean?
Yeah.
Funds reclaimed. Well, I think I've explained this multiple times already to this committee.
You haven't.
We explained this multiple times already to the committee that we had retrieved the money from the Onyx exchange because we did not come to an agreement.
So you prematurely gave the Onyx exchange $200K.
No. I would ask the representative to refer to my opening statement where I said that the initial $200,000 was given on the condition that they would grant us access to their balance sheets and to have basically total access to their Discord. And of course, the condition was not that they could spend the money, but that we would simply put the money in their company balance so that it would look to the public like the Onyx exchange had money, right? Because you wouldn't trust a bank that had no money in their vault, right? And you might want to run on the bank. But if the government came in and went, okay, we're going to put in a couple of money here.
So you still transferred.
It's a prop.
So you still transferred $200K from the prune to Texas to the Onyx exchange.
I believe we have answered that question sufficiently.
You haven't. Please answer.
No, I answered that question. We did transfer the $200,000.
Okay, you did.
I mean, okay. Of course we did. It's reported in the budget transcripts as is legally required.
Okay, then what stopped the Onyx exchange from spending that money?
We mandated that they were not allowed to spend it.
Did you make a contract with the Onyx exchange?
we had an agreement, and we were going to find it out of
Was
them.
it a contract?
No, we would have disbanded their company if they had spent our money. That's what we would have done. We would have
You were
utilized.
blackmailing them.
No, we would have utilized our authority. We would have utilized our authority under the Jurisdictions Act and our authority with regards to business creation, and we would have disbanded them if they had spent our money, and we would have fined them for the money to be returned.
So you would unilaterally decide that, without a contract, that the Onyx Exchange
We
owed the
had
200K back.
come to an agreement. The agreement was that we would have access to the Onyx Exchange. We would have access.
Do you have records of this agreement?
And yes. So what we did was I would like to point out that what we did, we entered into a purchase agreement with their Onyx credit their Onyx. I'm confusing my words here. The Onyx credit system, or what is it called? So basically, you were under the Onyx conditions, whereas the I'm trying to find the exact contract here. Please bear with me.
So there was a contract.
Exchange credits. Hold on. Right. So this is the contract which we entered into, which of course is available and can be seen on the Exchange Credits tab. Let me see here. So Onyx Exchange Credits, so the idea behind the Onyx Exchange Credit was that you could submit money to the Onyx so that you could conduct trades directly from Discord instead of having to do slash.
Wait, so you're referring to a contract right now?
Yes. So wait, what? This is the contract.
Can you put the link of the contract in voice chat, please?
Yeah, we would now trade shares without having to be online.
Can you please put the link in the contract in voice chat?
This is the DEC policy. I can link it to you if you want me to find the exact ticket. So what I did was I opened a ticket under the Onyx Exchange Credit.
Can you give a transcript of the ticket?
That will take some time. I have to dig through it. If the committee would be willing to provide me 48 hours to do that, I can provide that.
Okay, can you submit the transcript of the ticket to me in DMs, and I will release it later.
I will submit that to Congress Cabinet.
Go ahead.
Communication.
Wait. At first you said there wasn't a contract, and now
there was a contract. Well, there was
a contract.
And here's the thing. Here's what we did. We utilized our authority as the department to enforce the Anti-Scams Act on the Onyx Exchange.
Was there a contract? This is not my question. Was there a contract?
You have to let me talk. The Onyx Exchange had been in violation of the reserve ratio. As I said before in my opening statements, they were supposed to have a 50% reserve ratio. They only had 1 in 9, right? And so they were legally not allowed to spend any more money below 50%, but they did. And so they were already in violation.
So you made a contract with them?
We utilized, yes. Well, we didn't make them. They had a contract which is for the Onyx Exchange credit system, and we entered into it. That's how we did it. So legally, the Onyx Exchange was obligated to give back all of our money at our request.
Oh, so you deposited 200K of government funds into the exchange contracts, the exchange credits.
Could you repeat that?
So you deposited 200K of government money into the Onyx Exchange credit system.
Yes, that is essentially what we referred to as the bailout colloquially. But what it actually was that we purchased exchange credits.
Okay, and how did that give you the right to look into the Onyx Exchange?
We made a separate agreement to that. It was if we purchased $200,000 worth of exchange credits, that they would allow us access to the to their back channels.
Well, the Onyx Exchange released a document in their announcements. I'm not sure if this is the contract you're actually referring to. I'll post it.
No, that is not the contract. That contract.
That's not.
No, that contract was the further negotiation. If we agreed to keep the money in as an exchange credit, or if we were to basically purchase a ownership stake, which would mean that we no longer would use the exchange credit to buy ownership stake, or we were to give it to them as a loan, right? Then that contract comes into effect.
Okay, so no deal
That is
was made. Okay, but so no deal was made that the credits could not be withdrawn
No,
from the Onyx exchange.
No, there was a deal that was made where credits must be withdrawn at our request, and that is the exchange's own policy.
No, but there was not a deal that said credits couldn't be withdrawn until a certain date.
No, there wasn't, because we hadn't signed an agreement there yet. And so what happened was, as soon as we made the decision to exit the negotiations and to withdraw the money, our as we had withdrawn from our agreement, Woody was no longer obligated to allow us access to the Onyx exchange, and Woody is still doesn't have to allow us access to the Onyx exchange, but Woody has, for the sake of transparency, allowed us to continue monitoring.
Okay, then another question. So you reclaimed the 200K from the Onyx.
Yes.
So where did the money go?
Money went directly back into the DC government balance.
In the DEC or DC?
To the DC government balance.
Okay, but then the budget says funds used 200K, Department DEC returned to appropriated balance. What does that mean?
Returned to, well, as it was originally approved, the treasurer had appropriated $200,000 to the DC government balance, so it was returned to the appropriated balance.
The DC government was appropriated to its balance, or the DEC account?
Well, I pruned the money, and so I gave it back. I gave it to the DC government balance.
All right.
Well, here's the thing. I believed I legally didn't have to report that, as that was technically income to the government and not spending. However, for the sake of transparency and on the advice of the president and the leaders of the DEC, I elected to do so because I believe that transparency would be the best.
Yeah, because you're also required to post pruning.
No, that was, well, we were required to post pruning on the Treasury tab. We were not required to post pruning in the budget channel. However, I still did so because it would be best to inform Congress
because
of
it was legally obligated. Okay.
No, we were not. Okay, Representative,
Okay, thank you.
No, Representative, we are not legally obligated to post prunes to the budget channel. We're legally obligated to post prunes to the repossession form.
Well, thank you for your time. If any representative wants to ask any questions, we will do that, or else we'll move on to answer questions from the public. All right. We'll move on to questions from the public. Does anybody have any questions?
Can I motion for a 5-minute recess?
Yes, you can.
Thank you.
You can recess, and I'll take some questions. Wait, while you do that. Okay, Marty, ready? You can come up. Okay. Marty? Please, okay. I'll just answer your questions in voice chat then. Okay, who has a question? Okay, relax. Isn't 30 meant to post pruning in the budget chat? No. He can post it on the forums, but he is required to post it. Okay, Dopper, what's your question? Does anybody just raise your hand if you have a question? Okay.
All right, I got my water.
All right. Dopper, what's your question?
I'll answer Elena's question in chat. People demand the contract that isn't a contract. It is a contract. The contract can be found on the Onyx Exchange Discord. And it's quite public. And the contract was that we buy Onyx Exchange credits and they give it back to us when we ask for it. That's the contract. We did not have a contract for the later parts. We did have a contract for the initial send.
Okay, but can you just post the record of the
There
contract?
are 2 contracts that were in question. There were 2 questions. There were 2
Can you
contracts.
post them?
Can I post them? They are. I will link them directly to the Onyx Exchange. But here I'll link them to the Onyx Exchange.
Thank you.
And I will submit a transcript to Your Highness within a couple of days.
All right. Thank you very much. Yes. Okay. Does anybody have any more questions before we close this investigation hearing?
Oh, I have a question. Where did the 900K go? As someone would say.
Oh yes, of course, the 900K.
Someone needs to
Would
answer.
you like to answer that, 30?
I could answer that.
Okay, you can answer it.
The DEC conducted a assessment of the government's spending, and we realized that the current levels is consistent with a spending of about $20,000 to $40,000 a day. And so what happened was we had this discussion in cabinet, which I'm not sure if I'm allowed to talk about it, but we realized that under the previous administration, so under Austin and under West, the wage plugin did not pull money directly from the DC government balance, which meant that they could simply appropriate the money to the departments to spend without having to account for how wage was eating away at the balance. And so since staff reaffirmed that plugin system, we've seen a tremendous decrease in the government balance, and that is, I guess, normal to say the least, considering how much money is being spent on wages every day. So people focus on the $900,000 prune, which I guess is fair, but we have actually pruned more than the $900,000, much more than that. And depending on what the next government wants to do, I don't know whether or not they want to eliminate wages or if they want to like print money or whatever. The situation is entirely consistent with what we've been seeing. So if we pruned about 900,000 at the start of January, we could expect the amount that we currently have to be consistent with the spending.
Thank you. Nacho, do you have a question?
So we were all asking for the link to the contract. You sent us a link to a post that they said, but it has nothing to do with, it doesn't even mention the government once.
No, it doesn't.
So how is that a contract that's binding between the government and the Onyx Exchange?
It's the Onyx's own policy that they would give back the Onyx Exchange credits upon request.
So can you explain to me how they're binded by like anything, saying that they're going to give it back to you when there's literally nothing that like
they're binded by law. They're binded by law.
Do you have the paper that says that they're required to give you the money back? Or did you just forcefully take it from them?
Yes. No, we did not.
You forcefully took it from them?
We did not forcefully take it.
Then why did you fine them the $200K that you gave them without any paperwork that says?
Because Woody was not online at the time.
Okay, but still, why were you using fining opportunities in your position when even if they weren't online? Huh?
Well, because we had ended our negotiations and we were going to retrieve the money.
Okay, but yet
they were
still...
Okay, again, it was an understanding that we had with the owner of the Onyx Exchange. And I'm pretty sure the Onyx wasn't going to cheat the government out of $200,000.
Okay, so now you're saying that you're trusting $200,000 of... Hold on, no. You're not going to tell me to be quiet. Like, you can walk over these representatives as much as you want, but you will let me finish talking because I'm a concerned citizen and it's my tax dollars here, okay?
Go ahead.
So you're telling me that you trusted a private business with $200,000 of my private citizens' tax dollars, and you didn't even have a piece of paper to say that they were required, that you can take to a court of law that they would give it back. And then you're just basing it off an assumption.
We do have a piece.
Then link us the piece of paper.
The piece of paper can be found in the transcripts, which I will send to this committee at a later time.
At a later time? No, you should be able to pull it up right now.
No.
Oh, so now you okay? I'll just let that be on the record. All right, I'll just go back to the audience because who cares?
I'd like
Okay.
to repeat that. I would like to repeat that there were absolutely zero chance that this money would simply be taken by
How?
the government. The DEC had and continues to have the authority to deregister that corporation should they have conducted that action.
I have another question.
Oh my god.
Into the audience.
I got another question. If you were going to hold you accountable.
Well, not sure. We're first moving on to other people first.
Okay.
Okay, then we can go back to you. Okay. Relax. Did you still want to come up?
Well, this ought to be fun.
Hi, Roland.
Hi, 30. Been a long time since we talked, huh?
I'm sorry I called you a kid last month.
Oh, that was like 2 months ago.
Yeah, I apologize.
Oh, thank you. All right.
Very rude of me.
All right, so let's get started anyway. In your own code of conduct, which I have a screenshot of the part in question, you have all of your employees say that that they agree to this code of conduct, and it specifically says, and I'll post a screenshot on VC, that they must act with openness, honesty, and integrity. In everyday dealings, whether with fellow employees, supervisor, or the public, these dialogues must exemplify. I can never say that, but they must respect the public. Why have you not really been open about anything? And why have you actually? I'm sorry, but why have you actually been a jerk to some of the people in the public, and even to your own employees?
Section 11 of the Code of Conduct, which pertains to classification, prohibits me from answering that question to the full extent. I will say that I try my best to be open to members of the public and to the Congress. Congress at any time may ask me questions if they wish, which they're doing now, and they can ask me questions in DMs at any time.
Wait, so
I have a... Oh, no, correct, you go.
what part of the information is classified?
Well, I cannot say what part is classified because it's classified.
Or just like a general description?
Well, basically anything which pertains to what an employee has said in any of our Discord channels, I cannot say.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. But if you want to ask about like general policy, as you do about like the 200K bailout or about Onyx, or about
we already covered that.
We communicate those to the public. But if you were to ask me, what did the team leader of the compliance team say about this and that, I can't tell you, and I won't tell you.
I understand. Relax. Go ahead. Ask your second question.
So I actually did a little bit of digging since the last time we had a central price index, and that was actually 4 months ago. May I ask why you...
It's been consistently updated. Has it not? It's
No,
on.
it has not.
It's on the
It has
same.
not.
It's on the same spreadsheet. You just have to click into the tabs. So I believe the last time we made a forum post about it was like November or October, but it's in the tab, so it's on the same form, and you just have to click towards the December and January tabs.
Then why didn't you actually say that this is being regularly updated?
Well, it's regularly
to what is
updated.
actually happening?
Why
have you been 30? Why have you been public about that?
Why haven't I been public about that?
Yes.
I was under the impression that the public knows about this. I mean, I could do it right now. Hold on. The DEC also has it logged in our library. I'm very proud of my library, but it's also logged. I could send it out to everyone right now. Y'all want to see it here. This is the one for January. Let me do a press release or a government announcement. Do a government announcement. Oh no, government announcement. No, capital letters.
Okay.
There it is.
All right. Relax. Did you have any more questions?
Why haven't any of the price index been updated for, let's see, like a couple weeks? Actually, almost coming on
We
3
update
weeks.
the price index every month, with the exception for December because there was rather low activity in the DEC. And by the time we started doing the December one, we realized that it was more accurate to say it was the January one. And so we decided to simply skip December and go for January. Unfortunately.
Why was
Sometimes
your
that happens when it's over the holidays.
The holidays only last for about a couple days, so why would an entire department be basically completely out of service for an entire month?
Well, I can't speak for what my employees do. Obviously, real
Oh,
life.
you're the secretary.
Obviously, real life. Representative, I do not appreciate that interjection.
I don't care.
Obviously, members of my department are entitled to their own lives, to be with their family and to spend that time as they wish. And it did decrease our efficiency in terms of being able to collect the consumer price index data. But you do have to recognize that the consumer price index collects hundreds of data points every month, and it is very taxing on the employees to do it. And it takes about an hour to do a couple of dozen of these because you have to run around, you got to find the store, you got to record all the little bits of information. So it is a very hard task. And Dauber's asking why we haven't automated this. We did attempt to automate this. Back when I was head of the economics department, I asked End for a file on everyone's purchase request. And I still have, well, not purchase, on everyone's like purchases for a couple months, and it was a tremendous amount of data, and it was very hard to sort through, and it was a little too much. So, and also, we don't really need to know everything about everyone. We just need to know how the prices are moving based on those particular numbers. So it is a hard job. It is a hard job, and it's, I would say it's unfair to members to demand that they spend hours during the holidays to go over it. And obviously, Christmas to New Year's was a very busy time for most of us. So apologies to the public, but I didn't realize people are very eager about the December consumer price index.
Okay, relax. Did you have any more questions, or can we move on to Nacho? He's been very eager to speak.
I have one more.
All right.
Which I've been wanting to know the answer to for a couple months. Okay, so a couple months ago, you announced that the DEC will be purchasing guns such as rocket launchers, Remingtons, handguns, assault rifles, muskets, space guns, and snipers, along with NATO rounds and 0.50 BMG rounds. And when asked what you were doing with the weapons once they were purchased, you said that you would keep them.
Yep.
And when asked why, you said, I can't fully remember, but you said that you don't want to destroy the hard work of the armorers. But if they aren't really going to see the weapons again, why keep them after all? If pretty much no one's ever going to see them.
We actually keep them for the purposes of storage only. As recently as a couple of weeks ago, the DPA secretary asked me in cabinet about whether or not we had guns, and of course I was like, yeah, it's stored, with the DEC. I would just give them all to you. We've also transferred ownership of those guns to the Department of Justice. This was, I think, when Goldblood was still secretary. Yeah, and Lily can confirm. We transferred ownership of that to them. The reason we brought the guns was because the Economic Groves Act, authored by Representative Mr. Gass or something, basically directed the DEC to.
Gass, by the way.
Yeah. So directed the DEC to purchase about $50,000 worth of stimulus products from an industry we identified as lacking in support. And I identified the armory industry as one which was lacking in support. And so we formulated this policy in line with what Congress had directed us to do.
Why did you not, at the time when it seemed like they weren't going to be handed over to the DOJ, why didn't you just burn them?
I don't believe in burning things because that really just destroys it's inefficient, and especially when we could simply just keep them and give them over to the DPA for events, or if in the future the government wants to liquidate them, there's a way for that. So we were keeping our options open by not burning the guns.
But at the time, it seemed like these weren't just going to sit in barrels for seemingly ever. So again, why not just burn them or
they
throw
have
them in
been
a cactus?
Well, they have been sitting in barrels for forever, and I personally don't believe in destruction of property needlessly. Again, this is Renmark. This is in Australia. We don't need to be crushing guns all the time.
All right.
That's all my questions right now.
All right. Thank you for your questions.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
I'll pull up Nacho. Nacho?
Oh, I didn't even realize that I came up here. I was like, why is it not accepting me to come up to speak? Okay. Sorry. Completely missed that. There it is. In reference to the DEC ticket, the daily chip opened in regards to transparency on a matter, can you please explain why a private company has to abide to a policy that is listed under the Employee Code of Conduct, in which
I'll answer short.
Please don't cut me off. In which
no company needs to abide by the Employee Code of Conduct. They must abide by DEC policies.
Okay, so explain to me then why you made me and my company abide to a policy that's listed under your Employee Code of Conduct that all of your employees have to agree to and sign the bottom of the page, which is listed under that thread. And when I contested it, you forced me to have to abide to it.
Are you going to let me answer?
Are you going to let me finish the question?
Have you finished your question?
No. Since you keep interrupting every 2 seconds.
Well, let's let Nacho ask his question, and then let 30
maybe
answer
not
his question.
Some of his questions in writing.
Maybe you should let me finish. Jesus. Anyways,
maybe you should
finish your question.
It is finished. Thank you.
Oh my god. Okay.
I didn't even know where I was in the question. He just kept interrupting.
Could you restate your question?
Yes, for Foley. In reference to the DEC ticket, the daily chip opened in regards to transparency on a matter, can you please explain why a private company has to abide to a policy that is listed under the Employee Code of Conduct, in which all DEC employees have to respond to saying that they agree to and that they will uphold when a private business did not respond to it, so thus they don't have to apply to it?
I will answer a question in two parts. First, no company or private entity which has not signed a code of conduct needs to abide by the code of conduct, because the code of conduct consists of all sorts of provisions, such as being transparent, being honest, classification, keeping secrets, yada yada. What I referred when I referred you to the code of conduct was because it was a detailed list of the procedure about freedom of information. So on the code of conduct, it simply states what the employee side is supposed to do with regards to freedom of information requests. And so I simply directed you to that, which was the most detailed policy at the time. So you don't have to abide by it, but it's just listed there that the Freedom of Information Act, Freedom of Information Policy exists. It was a good place to reference policies that exist. And I believe the Freedom of Information Policy has been published before in government announcements, but has since been lost. But we do keep, we have integrated that into the Code of Conduct. And so that guides our decision on how to answer your question.
Okay, well, I think there are a lot of questions right now. I think Representative Wetsy still wanted to ask a question, I believe. I think we will be the rest of the questions you can submit to me, and if and I will submit it 2:30 in writing, if that's okay. And then I'll put a report out with the answers. All right. Representative Wetsy, you can. Or wait, Nacho, you were done with your question, right? Okay, then Representative Wetsy, you can finish your questions.
Thank you for your question, Representative. As I stated before, the situation is complicated. We are currently investigating what is happening, and of course, with regards to the thing you said, our comment is going to be limited by the Classifications Act, but what we can say about that particular thing you want us to say. I can't speak too much about that particular thing, but of course, I hope I've answered your question sufficiently.
I just noticed that Betsy is not able to talk right now. So I think it would be better to also submit that in writing and get back to it later. If that's okay.
Oh, Relax has a question. Can I answer that one?
Okay, you can.
Why was the Onyx able to get 200K from the DEC? If you read the January 7th report, which has been released on government announcements, I assessed that the Onyx was worth more and that it was in the national interest to ensure that they didn't go under. So when Woody messaged me on January 5th, it was very, they seemed desperate and seemed on the verge of collapsing. And I don't know about you, but I have, a couple of $1,000 in the Onyx. I'm sure most people here have more than that. I haven't been trading on there since I've become secretary as a principal. But I recognize that combined together, everyone thinks that there's $25 million. And of course, so long as people think they have $25 million, everything will be, fine. But what happens is if the Onyx exchange goes down, or if they're unable to continue operating, or if their staff, they can't pay their staff, then what that means is that money that everyone thinks they have becomes paper. And we had to make sure that did not happen. No, the Onyx does not have 25 million, but people believe that they have 25 million collectively believe that they themselves have $25 million worth of value. So
that's not true.
Think about this. Companies such as the Hamilton City Bank list their assets and their net worth in terms of what the Onyx says they have, right? And so does a lot of people. So does many people here. And basically, when you say, oh, I have, say, one Walmart stock and it's worth, how much is Walmart stock? $80 maybe. I'll say a Walmart stock is worth $100, right? And if you believe that you have 100 Walmart stocks, right, then you have $10,000, and you'll be able to write that off as you have $10,000, and you live with that assumption, right? But suppose the Onyx exchange collapse, then you literally lose that money you believe you have, and it will affect the way you spend the remainder of your money.